Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so today we're unpacking a truly fascinating case study on the modernization of government reviews. Now, if you've ever felt like giving feedback to a massive bureaucracy is kind of like, I don't know, shouting into a void, or maybe like filling out Form 82B just so you can request Form 82C, yeah, you are absolutely going to love what we cover in this explainer. We're looking at a radical shift in how a major government regulator decided to gather both public and internal feedback. Instead of closed doors and hidden reports, they just threw the doors wide open. We're going to explore exactly how they did it, who actually showed up, and what it all means for the future of how institutions interact with us. So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the high-stakes building regulator. Second, the transparency challenge. Third, enter collective ideation. Fourth, who joined the conversation. And finally, decoding the feedback. Let's get right into it. Part 1. The high-stakes building regulator. When you look at the stunning, just absolutely massive skyscrapers across the Queensland skyline, you aren't just looking at glass and steel. You are looking at the direct result of strict standards and regulations. The Queensland Building and Construction Commission, or QBCC for short, well, they aren't just a faceless bureaucracy. They are the literal regulatory framework that ensures the physical safety of these massive structures. They provide remedies for defective work, and ultimately, they drive confidence in a huge sector of the broader economy. So getting their governance right, it isn't just paperwork. It is an absolutely high-stakes necessity for public safety and economic growth. Moving on to Part 2, the Transparency Challenge. So picture this. It's November 2021. Amidst a whole environment of local and national reform, the Queensland government commissioned an independent review of the QBCC's governance, their decision-making, and how they handle complaints. This was led by independent reviewer Jim Vargasy, AM, and the main goal was to find practical ways to strengthen the QBCC, really transitioning it into a modern, insights-driven regulator. Now, stakeholder engagement officially kicked off in January 2022 and ran right through March. But, the real story here isn't just that timeline. It's how they decided to actually engage with those stakeholders during those critical months. Which brings us to Part 3. Enter collective ideation. Right, so this is where the Queensland government made a massive, and I mean massive, technological pivot. They decided to do something radically different to capture feedback. To pull this off, they partnered with the Queensland University of Technology and brought in a platform called Mindhive. Now, Mindhive specializes in this really cool concept called collective ideation. Basically, by definition, this is a process that connects users to an online community to gain rapid insights and innovate at scale, all in real time. The core philosophy here is absolutely crucial. You see, traditional chat rooms can actually hurt collective intelligence because people naturally kind of sequester themselves into isolated echo chamber groups, right? But collective ideation completely breaks that habit. It surfaces the insights and intelligence of all the participants in one giant open space so that everyone can evaluate the ideas together and drive much better unified solutions. And there is a staggering contrast here. I mean, think about it. Traditionally, government submissions require you to write up your thoughts all alone and send them in individually. Then, a few officers sitting behind closed doors synthesize these totally siloed submissions and eventually draft a final report. But the Mindhive approach used here, it was a totally transparent, collaborative environment. We're talking over 400 stakeholders participating and observing the discussion completely out in the open. It's essentially a world-first approach where stakeholders could discuss and actually surface critical insights together, essentially co-designing the recommendations. It's a real game changer. All right, Part 4. Who joined the conversation? When we dig into the sector demographics of the actual participants, a super compelling picture emerges. Take a look at this. Almost half of the identified participants were either QBC licensees or building industry consumers. Now, this is exactly what you want to see. The very voices of the people who are directly affected by the building industry, the ones actually applying for licenses or dealing with defective building work, they were highly active in this process. We also saw solid participation from peak industry bodies and other government agencies. But there's another specific group that really stood out to me. The absolutely crucial point here is this fascinating metric about internal participation. When you look at the average number of comments made per participant, active QBCC employees actually averaged more comments, over 4 per person, compared to external stakeholders, who averaged around 2. To put that into perspective, that brilliantly illustrates a massive internal desire for systemic improvement. It really shows that the people working inside the QBCC, the ones who are closest to the daily outcomes and the real-world consequences of these policies, well, they had a lot they felt needed to be said, and they were incredibly eager to contribute to the reform. Which leads us to part 5, decoding the feedback. Okay, so when all these written insights, suggestions, and recommendations from this huge pool of crowdsourced data were structured thematically, the breakdown was incredibly revealing. Now, you might expect a public forum for a government regulator to just devolve into a giant dumping ground for individual grievances, right? Well, actually, scratch that. While 22% of responses did focus on the complaints handling process and 19% on the compliance framework, a massive 56% of the responses focused on the QBCC as an entire organization. This included really deep structural feedback regarding their procedures, policies, systems, staff, leadership, and communication. The participants weren't just in there complaining, they were actively diagnosing the organizational machine itself. And those deep insights, they didn't just appear out of thin air. They were strategically drawn out by 19 carefully crafted core questions posed to the participants in the forum. The reviewers asked things like, how well does the QBCC perform overall? How efficient are the actual processes for licensing and insurance? Or, can you identify emerging risks for incoming senior leadership? By asking these highly targeted questions about capability, culture, and structural integrity, they effectively guided the collective intelligence to focus on actionable, systemic solutions, rather than just getting bogged down in surface-level issues. And honestly, the response to this whole method was just overwhelming. This willingness from the Queensland government to actually take risks with tech-driven open engagement, it resulted in participation levels on the platform being more than 30% beyond the industry standard for similar public discussions. 30%! It clearly illustrates just how hungry stakeholders are for a modern, genuinely transparent way to be heard. I want to really highlight this powerful takeaway straight from the report itself. Everyone's voice and insights were equal, transparent, and influential. Seriously, that is the ultimate success of this co-designed, collaborative approach. It wasn't about the loudest voice in the room winning behind closed doors, It was about laying the collective wisdom completely bare for everyone to absorb, evaluate, and build upon together. It's a huge testament to the fact that when you give people a genuinely equal and transparent platform, they will absolutely rise to the occasion and provide deeply valuable insights. Which brings us to our final thought. The report notes that governments who are willing to use these kinds of new technologies to engage in profound, meaningful ways, they are the future of government architecture. So I'll leave you with this question to ponder. Are open-source, collective ideation platforms the true future of how we build and reform our institutions? Just think about your own local governments or even the organizations you work for every day. How much more efficient and trusted could they be if they adopted this sort of crowdsourced, fully transparent model? It's a fascinating paradigm shift for sure, and one we should all be paying very close attention to. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.